Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome and I'm here to break down UFC Vancouver, which goes down this weekend, obviously in Canada. I think it's been quite a while as well since the UFC's been to Canada. So yeah, looking forward to this, and also from the card perspective as well. I know I say this quite a lot, but I genuinely just do get excited for UFC events, and I feel like the card from top to bottom, it's good. There's some well-matched fights. There's some 50-50 fights. There's some fights where I think that the odds are just completely wrong. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this event. And I'm also looking forward to just getting right back at it. Last weekend in Rio was, for a polite way of putting it, just not my event. Every now and again this will happen. But, yeah, it was not a good event for me. But, like I say, nobody's right 100% of the time, right? More often than not, I'm right. But yeah, sometimes there will be those off events, and that last weekend was one of those cards. So looking to get right back on that horse and get back at it. But like I say, I love this card from a fight perspective. The matchups are good, and I'm seeing some good value from a betting perspective as well. So yeah, looking forward to getting into it. But just before we do, as always, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. If you're a long-term gambler that loves the value of the written breakdowns so you can make your own informed decision, then we've got a long-term gamblers section for you. If you're somebody that really likes to play the long-term game but doesn't want to do any work whatsoever, there is an official bet section, which is the official bets of exactly where the money is going of the professional handicapper, which is myself. Or if you're somebody that doesn't like the long-term game, you'll just like to have a little bit of fun on the night, we've got a fun gamblers section with pre-built parlays. We've got a parlay option section so you can build and create your own parlays from what we believe are the best parlay pieces of the night. We have all that for you in there as well. And then of course, with every betting subscription comes Base AI, our UFC prediction software. We do not separate the AI from the handicapper advice. We have everything in all of our subscriptions apart from the dog of the week, which is, again, self-explanatory on the website. But every betting subscription, full betting subscription, comes with both Base AI and a handicapper betting advice, which, to be honest, I think most people are here for the AI that's been absolutely firing all year, even on the last event where I just genuinely believe was a very tricky event, post-fight in hindsight when you look at the results, but the AI is still hitting decent numbers on those events that aren't that great, again, from a hindsight perspective. So yeah, everything's got Base AI and the handicapper advice in. All you have to do is choose whether you want to purchase for one event monthly or take advantage of our annual subscription, which is just $99 for the entire 12 months. That's 12 months of UFC events and betting advice, every single card from Base AI and the handicapper, and that's all at MMAplay365.com. So with the introduction out the way, with the promo out of the way, let's get down to breaking some fights down. And of course, as always, we start in the main event. It's a really good main event. We've got Reinier de Ridder versus Brendan Allen. Now, this is a relatively short notice for Brendan Allen. It was supposed to have been Reinier de Ridder versus Anthony Hernandez, which, to be honest, I would have definitely preferred that fight. Like, Reinier de Ridder is on unreal form right now, and Anthony Hernandez is probably on even crazier form right now. He's one of the most in form, hot, on fire fighters in the division, and that would have been just an incredible fight. And stylistically as well, it would have been an incredible fight. But what I kind of like about the Brendan Allen replacement, and look, just before I get into that, I don't think this is so short notice that it's going to play like a massive factor on the fight. From Brendan Allen's perspective, whether he wins or loses, I don't think the short notice is going to factor in at all. So I do think that Allen will have been ready and be prepared for this type of fight. But again, what I was leading into is what I like about the switch up of opponent here from Hernandez to Allen is Allen is a very similar style to Hernandez. There are differences between the two, but Allen's predominantly a grappler as well, and Anthony Hernandez is predominantly a grappler. The slight difference is Hernandez's grappling is just at a different, MMA wrestling is at a different level right now. Brendan Allen doesn't have that level of MMA wrestling, but Allen is still very fluid on the ground, and I think with de Ridder being predominantly a grappler as well, it's going to make for some very interesting actions on the mat, the topside grappling, the sweeps, the reversals, the submission attempts. I genuinely think it's going to be very intriguing from a grappling perspective. And it's actually one of those types of fights. I say it quite a lot when you've got grappler versus grappler. The likelihood is both of the fighters, both of the grapplers are going to be that good from a top perspective. Whoever wins the fight is likely going to win the fight because they've been able to get to that top position, which then you have to rewind a little bit in those transitions to the ground and think, well, who's got the better wrestling out the two or the better takedowns, because that is the fighter that's more likely going to end up on the top. And this is where I feel like they're quite even from that perspective. Like neither are the type of fighter to shoot blast double legs, in the center of the cage. They are more shoot a takedown, get a body lock, push their opponent back to the cage, look for trips, look for drag downs, those types of takedowns, rather than your single legs, your double legs. Of course they can both complete a single leg and a double leg, but again, when you're at this level in the UFC and everyone seemingly at this level can defend takedowns, you have to start being a little bit more inventive with how you get the fight down to the mat. And again, trips and, using drags to get your opponent down to the mat, reaping the legs, that sort of thing. That's the type of takedown that will catch the opponents out at this level where, like I say, everyone seemingly can defend double legs and single legs. So this is where I think they're quite even, actually, and probably the most even out of the three major disciplines within the striking, wrestling and grappling I'm talking about. Because from a grappling perspective, I do think de Ridder's the better grappler, and I kind of trust de Ridder more on bottom than I do Allen on bottom. So if one of these fighters is going to have more success in getting back up to the feet if they're on the back, or sweeping or reversing or being a threat off the back, I think that's more likely to be de Ridder than Allen. Not by a long shot, but I do think there's a slight edge there. Then when you come to the striking, I think de Ridder is ahead of Brendan Allen. Although both fighters have gone on that same sort of stylistic journey, predominantly grappling. Then they reach the sort of top of the sport, and now they're trying to sort of develop that striking to aid the wrestling and grappling, and also allow them to be competitive with strikers at a high level as well. They've both gone on that same journey. They've both developed, they've both improved the striking massively over the years, and you have to give them credit for that. But what I saw last time out from de Ridder against Robert Whittaker being relatively competitive striking over a 5-round fight, I was super impressed with that, because Whittaker should have been levels above de Ridder from a striking perspective, and he just didn't look levels above. And I don't think Whittaker just had an off night. I think de Ridder's just genuinely getting better, and I think that striking is, I don't think it'll ever catch up to the grappling of de Ridder, but it's getting as close as it possibly can get. And I think that when you look at the striking between de Ridder and Allen, and bear in mind Allen's striking has improved as well, you've got to give him credit there. I think de Ridder, there's an edge there in the striking for him as well. So I'm kind of seeing a slight edge within the striking for de Ridder, a slight edge within the grappling for de Ridder, and then it just comes down to the wrestling. And if de Ridder's going to be the better striker, this is my logic, if de Ridder's going to be the better striker in this fight, he's the more likely fighter that's going to be aggressive and coming forwards. I think he's also got sneaky power as well in his striking. He's also really long and rangy with knees and elbows. So I think if Allen tries to be the fighter moving forwards, because this is going to be crucial to whoever is more successful with the takedowns, the fighter that's, being the one that's on the front foot rather than the back foot. So I feel like if Allen tries to get on the front foot, de Ridder might just meet him in the middle, get into those close clinch positions where he's going to land elbows and knees, just be that tall, long, rangy fighter. But then that's going to prevent Allen from coming forwards too often, which I kind of think then if de Ridder is the better striker, he's also the more likely fighter to be moving forwards. Therefore, he's the more likely fighter to be successful in tying up and getting the takedowns down to the mat. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. I feel like it is going to be a competitive fight. If it goes to a decision, I'm just not sure we see Brendan Allen win 3 rounds out of the 5. I think de Ridder's been beaten the better level of competition. I think Brendan Allen's got some question marks on a couple of his recent wins as well. And, the losses that he's taken are the fighters that do have these slight edges against him. So I just feel that if it goes to a decision, I'd struggle to see Allen winning 3 rounds out of the 5. I think it's more likely that De Ridder wins 3 rounds, maybe even 4 rounds. You know, if there's a 4 rounds in any of these fighters, for me, it's going to be De Ridder rather than Allen. And then if you're looking at a finish, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a knockout, but even if it's a ground and pound TKO, again, that's more likely to be the fighter on top, and we've covered that. And then if there's a submission, again, more likely to be the fighter on top, and we've covered that. So I'm just seeing a lot of upside here for Reinier de Ridder. I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think we're going to see some interesting grappling moments in this fight. I can't wait to see this fight hit the mat, but I just think de Ridder's the better fighter. So for those reasons, I'm picking Reinier de Ridder to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, we've got Kevin Holland versus Mike Malott. So this is an interesting fight for Mike Malott because, in my opinion, this is his first fight back against super legit competition, a veteran of the UFC, somebody that's fought, you know, pretty much everybody that there is to fight at the highest level since the Neil Magny fight. Now, that Neil Magny fight, this is where we find out whether the Magny fight was a one-off or not, because, look, Malott was absolutely destroying Magny and then somehow fell off a cliff in round 3, and Magny ended up getting the finish. But to be fair, how many times have we seen Neil Magny do this, by the way? You know, I know this isn't a Neil Magny fight, but Mike Malott is not the first victim of that. And Malott was also, you know, quite green at that point, very skilled, but just green in experience. So when you're that green in experience and you fight a Neil Magny, and then that happens, then yeah, obviously there's going to be question marks. But since that fight, like, Magny's done this multiple times. He's done it to Zaleski dos Santos. He's done it recently to Jake Matthews. And both of those two fighters are absolutely seasoned vets. So can we just give Mike Malott a pass for what he did? You know, maybe it was a one-off. Maybe it was an off night. I'm kind of leaning towards that, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't want to put too much stock into what happened in that Neil Magny fight, because even if Magny hadn't done that to anybody else since, you can always put that down to being a little bit green in experience, and also the fact that you're fighting up in competition, you're fighting a level above yourself as well. And like I say, you know, any fighter can have an off night, any fighter, any athlete, you know, whether you're a football player, a rugby player, a tennis player, any fighter can have an off night just like any other athlete. So yeah, I kind of put that down to that for Mike Malott. Unless I see it again here, then obviously there's a clear issue somewhere. But until I see it again, I kind of am just writing it off. But either way, I don't think this is a straightforward fight for Malott. Like, Kevin Holland, like I say, is a seasoned vet. He's a tricky striker. He's long. He's rangy. He's got wrestling. He's got grappling. Admittedly, the wrestling's probably the weaker part. The grappling's decent. Like, it's a weird one with Kevin Holland because he's a black belt under Travis Luter, I believe. So, you know, it's a legitimate black belt he's got, but he can be got on the mat. And this is where some inconsistencies come from Holland. Like, he can have some fights where he looks phenomenal on the mat, and then he can have other fights where he doesn't. And I'm not talking about the De Ridder fight, for example, where De Ridder's levels above him from a grappling perspective. But I'm just talking about, like, how Kevin Holland can look good against a Jacare Souza, but then be completely stuck on his back against a Derek Brunson, for example. So there are a lot of inconsistencies in Kevin Holland's game, and I do think a lot of it comes from, you know, how serious he is coming into that specific fight, because he does play around a lot inside the cage. He does like to talk to his opponent, and look, it's his personality. It's what he brings as a fighter, and I believe every fighter should have a personality that shines through. But the thing is, with Holland's personality, I do feel that it can affect the outcomes of his fights, of whether he does get a win and he doesn't. Like, look at that fight he had against Wonderboy. He had absolutely every right to be on top of Wonderboy and just control the fight and win the rounds, and he didn't. He allowed him back up. He was having fun. He wanted to strike against a fighter that was levels above him from a technical striking perspective, and ended up losing the fight because of it. So I've always got, and I've been burned a couple of times with Kevin Holland, by the way. I've also cashed a couple on him. I've also cashed a couple against him. But, you know, more often than not, when I've bet on him, it's been, you know, I've been burnt by it. And from that, I just have a level of distrust in Kevin Holland. And then with Mike Malott on the other side, I genuinely think Malott is a fighter that is super well-rounded as well. I think they match up quite well from a stylistic perspective. But Malott, for me, is somebody that won't take too many chances, that will keep things nice and tight, that has probably learned from that mistake against Neil Magny, and might end up being one of the best losses that he ever takes in his career. But I just feel that Malott is a little bit tighter right now with offense, defense. He'll pick his shots. He won't overcommit himself. He won't put himself in a position where he's allowing somebody to absolutely, walk all over him and whitewash him. Malott's somebody that is solid everywhere. Good striking, good wrestling, good grappling, but also good defensively in those areas as well. And I feel like this is going to be one of those close fights where I could definitely see Holland winning a round, Malott winning a round, and one of the other rounds being super close. I could also see, Malott comfortably winning 2 rounds, comfortably losing 1 round. But I just don't know whether I trust Kevin Holland to be decisively beating Malott, because if this is a fight where, like I say, Malott doesn't output too much volume, he is quite cautious in what he throws, but efficient at the same time, which makes him a good fighter. But if there is some inactivity, I just feel like Holland's going to be talking away, trying to get in the mind of Malott, having fun in there. I just genuinely feel like this is a fight that Kevin Holland will just enjoy and have fun without too much pressure of some monster on the other side of the cage against him. And like I say, that's not a disrespect to Malott, because Malott's a good fighter and I'm actually picking him to win the fight. But he's just not like a Khamzat Chimaev that's just going to come at him at 100 miles an hour. I think this is a fight that Kevin Holland's going to enjoy thoroughly and have his personality shine through, and it's in those fights that I just do not trust him when it comes to an outcome and a result. So for those reasons, I'm picking Mike Malott to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Marlon Vera versus Aiemann Zahabi. Real interesting fight. Real interesting from a betting perspective as well, because now the market's respecting Aiemann Zahabi quite a lot, because this is a step up in competition for Zahabi. And look, you've got to hand it to Zahabi as well, by the way, because when he first came into the UFC, he had all this hype on him, which I always say is not the fighter's fault. He had so much hype on him because of his surname, because of his brother who owns TriStar, one of the best coaches, most knowledgeable coaches. And as soon as we saw that Firas Zahabi had a brother and he's in the UFC, all that hype goes on Zahabi, and there's so much expectation on his shoulders. He just did not live up to it for a few fights. Inconsistency. The fights he was winning were super close fights that he probably should have been losing, but ended up getting the nod on the judges' scorecards. So Zahabi had all this pressure on him, and then he just disappeared for a little while, and then he comes back, and then everyone's like, right, okay, so we're now completely flipped on Zahabi. He's a fraud. He's no longer UFC quality. Coming from somebody that was going to be the next best thing to somebody that shouldn't be in the cage is just the life of a fighter, unfortunately, from the fan perspective. But then he goes on and puts a 6-fight win streak together, which is super impressive at any level in the UFC. Winning 6 fights in a row is very difficult to do. And now he's landed in this fight with Marlon Vera, who, again, a seasoned vet, has been around for years, worked his way up in a similar way to Zahabi. At one point, people were saying that, Marlon Vera is just a low-level UFC fighter that's not gonna amount to too much, with no real high ceiling. And then suddenly Vera's fighting at the top of the division, competing against the very best, and still is. So this is a step up in competition for Zahabi, but one that just has to happen on a 6-fight win streak. That big step up just has to happen. You can't just keep fighting, around your level or lower. So it's a super interesting fight, but like I say, the betting market is now put a lot of respect on Zahabi. But I'm kind of seeing this a little bit similar pre-fight to last week. And I got this one wrong as well. But you kind of got to learn from your mistakes, even though every fight's different. And the fight that I'm referring to is Deiveson Figueiredo and Montel Jackson, because, Montel Jackson was the favourite, a bigger favourite, of course, than what Zahabi is here. But he was a favourite. It was his step up in competition as well, against a fighter that had been in and around the top, that might not be as competitive, in the top 3 anymore, and then suddenly is written off. And then Deiveson Figueiredo does end up winning the fight. And I can see a similar pattern here with Marlon Vera, a fighter that's no longer going to compete with the top 3, but still got the skill set and quality to compete with the top of the division, against a fighter that's got their big step up in competition. And I just feel that look, it's a close fight. There's things that I like about both fighters. There's things that I don't like about both fighters. For example, with Marlon Vera, I don't like that he's super low volume. I don't like that he often throws a round one away, or not throws it away, but doesn't do so much in round one, because then you're on the back foot. And in a 5-round fight, that's okay, because you've got 4 more rounds to do good work. But in a 3-round fight, you lose your first round, and you've got to win every round after that, or get a finish. It puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders. But Marlon Vera's kind of made that his thing, and that's what he does. And there's things that I really like about Vera. Like, he's, again, beaten some real good competition. He's super dangerous. He's big. He's strong for the division. He's forward pressing. He's durable. He will come forwards and put it on you. I just don't know if Zahabi is gonna fear any of that from Vera, though, which is going to make it a good fight. Now, Zahabi does have sneaky power, but more often than not, he's more of a technical striker than a fighter that's trying to put your lights out, whereas Vera is less volume, but more big action strikes, which is going to make for a very interesting striking fight here. But when it comes to which fighter I think is going to win the fight, well, look, I do think that Vera's experience edge here is going to matter. He's been in fights and, dragged himself across the finish line against fighters that are trickier than Zahabi, that at the time he fought them were, more skilled than Zahabi is right now. So I just feel that Aiemann Zahabi's gone on this 6-fight win streak, and I'm not sure he makes it 7. 7's a real statement, and that's like, if he beats Vera, he's got to be looking towards a title fight. You can't be on a 7-fight win streak in the UFC with your last win against Marlon Vera and not be heading towards that title fight. That just doesn't happen. It's got to be this is a serious win if Zahabi wins here, but I don't know. It's a close fight, and it wouldn't shock me if it was one of these close split decision types of fights. But in those close split decision types of fights, you tend to find that the savvy UFC vet is the one that just pulls himself over the line. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with Vera here. I think Vera can be forward facing enough on the front foot, putting big shots on Zahabi, with Zahabi on the back foot, out voluming him, but just the Vera looking like the fighter that's in control, the more dominant fighter in the fight. And like I say, when you add in that UFC experience as well, I just think Vera's going to do just enough here to get himself over the line. So for those reasons, I'm picking Marlon Vera to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Manon Fiorot versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. Now, again, talking about step-ups in competition, this is a massive one for Jasmine Jasudavicius, but again, one that has to happen. She's on a 5-fight win streak. She's fought some decent fighters. The only 2 fighters that she's lost against in the UFC are Tracy Cortez and Natalia Silva, who are both very, very good fighters. So Jasmine Jasudavicius, she's also not one of these fighters, by the way, because I've just kind of inferred there that she's beating the ones that she has to beat, but losing the ones that she's supposed to lose to. But she's actually got some really good wins in a win streak as well, including like Fatty McLean, who I think is a super bright prospect for the future. Still very young, still got some work to do, but still a very skilled fighter. So Jasudavicius has got some good wins in there. Mayra Bueno Silva, Jessica Andrade. Like, I know Andrade is not what she used to be, but like being decisive against these girls. Like, she's earned this shot against Manon Fiorot. Now, with Manon Fiorot, she's coming off the loss to Valentina Shevchenko. It was a definitive, decisive loss. I actually had, and I think, bet Fiorot in that fight. She didn't perform in the way that I thought she was going to perform. She's normally a lot better when it comes to, the defensive aspect of a game, but you've also got to appreciate that Valentina Shevchenko is one of the best in the world, has been for many, many years, and is one of the best to ever do it in women's MMA. So you've got to take that into consideration. Now, with Manon Fiorot and Jasudavicius, look, for me, Jasudavicius has got to get this fight down to the mat. Like, it's not even a question. And then when you look at Manon Fiorot, typically speaking, historically, she's defended takedowns well. She's strong in the clinch. And against like an Erin Blanchfield, for example, I also bet Blanchfield that fight. I've not been quite successful on Fiorot from a betting perspective. But like, Blanchfield struggled to get Fiorot down. But one of the reasons why I believe Blanchfield struggled to get Fiorot down and keep her down is because of that size. Blanchfield, I believe, is a little bit undersized for the division. Fiorot was very sizable for the division. So there was an obvious discrepancy there in the physicality. But the thing is with Jasudavicius is strong. She's big for the division as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see if she can get Fiorot down and how successful she's going to be there. But the one thing that I think that Jasudavicius might end up coming into some danger within this fight is the takedowns that she lands for someone with a wrestling background are quite delayed in transition. So what I mean by that is they're not like double legs inside the quick blast double legs inside the cage, or a quick single leg, or quick body lock and trip. They are methodically produced takedowns. So she'll clinch up, she'll push her opponent back to the cage, she'll start looking for trips and drag downs, and she's successful in doing that. But she's also got a very strong and physical fighter in front of her in this fight as well, which again, Jasudavicius is normally the much stronger fighter in most of her fights. But against Fiorot, she's not. I mean, at the very least, they're even. But if I had to put my money on which fighter is the more physical fighter, I'd still go Fiorot. But then also, when Jasudavicius is in the clinch working the takedowns, Fiorot's very good from a Muay Thai perspective, elbows and knees inside the clinch. So I kind of feel if Jasudavicius is going to be successful in this fight, she's got to get the takedowns, but she's got to hit them quick when she's shooting, or when she decides right now it's time to get the fight down to the mat. She can't be delaying for 30 to 60 seconds looking for a takedown. It's got to be quick, and this is where a window of opportunity, I think, starts to shorten a little bit and get smaller. Like Jasudavicius, if I didn't watch this fight and I woke up, and I know I say this all the time, if I didn't watch the fight, I woke up in the morning, looked at the looked at the results, and I saw that Jasudavicius had won on the scorecards against Fiorot, no, not going to be surprised. Like, Jasudavicius should have that level of respect on the name. But stylistically, pre-fight, I'm just thinking that, look, Fiorot's going to be light years ahead of Jasudavicius from a striking perspective. Like, whereas Jasudavicius's wrestling is better than Fiorot's, whereas grappling is better than Fiorot's, I don't think that the grappling is that high advanced and a level and maybe an edge above, yes, but not levels above. The wrestling, I think that Fiorot's defensive wrestling could cancel out the offensive wrestling on Jasudavicius. But then within the wrestling, there's going to be striking as well because of Jasudavicius's close quarters when she likes to try and look for her takedowns. And again, coming back to the striking, I think Fiorot's levels above with the striking. All fights start standing on the feet as well. If Fiorot's piecing Jasudavicius up, that's going to make closing the distance and shooting takedowns a little bit harder for Jasudavicius as well, to a point where she might get hesitant and even attempting to continue going to takedowns and then just continue to get pieced up on the feet. So I am leaning towards Manon Fiorot here. I think Jasudavicius is in the right spot where she should be for what she's achieved so far, but I just still think that Fiorot's going to be a level above here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Manon Fiorot to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Cody Gibson versus Aoriqileng. Now, man, I just don't even know with this fight, I'll be honest. Like, look, I can't come into every single fight on every single UFC event every single week and month and year and just be like, right, okay, yeah, I'm super confident in this fighter. Like, some fights are just so well matched that I just don't believe that anyone's going to have that solid of a read on this. Like, for me anyway. The one area where I do get a little bit more confident is the fact that Gibson does mix things up a little bit more. He can go to the mat, but Aoriqileng's dangerous on his feet, and where Gibson's quite a gritty, grindy type of fighter, like a dog fighter, he's got that real dog inside of him. Aoriqileng's quite smart from a striking perspective. He's intelligent. He's a sniper with his shots. So where Gibson needs to make things ugly to thrive, Aoriqileng would thrive where it's a little bit cleaner, fast paced but clean. And this is where you get the difference between the two. So for Gibson to really thrive in this fight, he's got to make it ugly. And I believe he can do on the feet striking. But then where I feel like there is some separation is I think Gibson's wrestling and grappling is above Aoriqileng's. It's just whether Gibson goes to that. Because if Aoriqileng's getting off on some good strikes, some good technical strikes, it's going to make Cody Gibson urgent to get involved, to make it ugly, to put a high pace on Aoriqileng, put him on the back foot, just pile volume on him, put him under pressure, be overwhelming, get in his face, again, just making it ugly. Does he then transition into the wrestling from those positions? I don't know. I believe that he might do, and because of that, that's kind of the way that I'm leaning here. Because if anything's going to separate these two from a striking perspective, it is going to be taking the fight somewhere else, i.e. on the mat. And if that happens, that fighter to take things on the mat that's more likely to switch things up is Cody Gibson. So I'm just thinking if both fighters have got a path to victory striking with the completely, different striking styles, which fighter has got that additional path to victory with the wrestling and grappling? I kind of feel that would have to be Cody Gibson. So in a fight that's just going to be razor close, I could see this being a back and forth war, a split decision, both fighters beaten up, both, winning decisively one round, then another round's really close. Or I could even see this type of fight with Aoriqileng just looking like he's shining through and wins 3 rounds. I could also see Cody Gibson, being a nightmare on the feet, striking, and then getting his wrestling and grappling going, and then him showing that separation from a stylistic perspective and winning 3 rounds himself. So you've got a situation where I feel like either fighter could win 3 rounds, either fighter could finish, in my opinion, as well, but then both fighters could also end up razor close, winning definitively 1 round each, and then the 3rd round being, a 50-50 round. I just feel like there's so many potential outcomes in this fight that just makes it very difficult. But when it comes down to path to victory, I feel like Gibson might have that additional path to victory. So that's the way I'm leaning. I'm picking Cody Gibson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Kyle Nelson versus Matt Frevola. So look, Kyle Nelson's not a fighter that I've ever trusted too much. I've never been overly high on, but I can appreciate that he is a UFC caliber fighter because you don't spend this long in the UFC without being a UFC caliber fighter. The issue that I have with Nelson, the biggest issue, and I'm not the only one that talks about this as well, I've heard other people mention it, is when the biggest trait and attribute of a fighter is toughness, durability, dogging you, that is not the best thing that people should be able to say about you. The best thing should be, okay, well, you're an elite striker, or you're a relentless chain wrestler, or you're a jiu-jitsu phenom. But when it's what's the best thing about this fighter, and the first thing people reply is toughness, well, that's a red flag. That's not the best thing that people should be saying about you. But with Kyle Nelson, it kind of is. Like, he's super tough, he's durable, he's got that dog in him, he's gritty, he's grindy. And like I say, from a skill set perspective, he's got the skills to hang in the UFC because he has UFC wins. You can't deny him of that. But I'm just not, I've never been overly high on him just because I feel like if somebody is a specialist striking or is a predominant striker or a predominant wrestler or a predominant grappler, they're likely going to have a clear path to victory against somebody like Kyle Nelson. Nelson thrives better when somebody is an all-rounder, as good of a striker as they are a wrestler and a grappler, and then Nelson's toughness, durability, grit and grind shines through, and then he ends up getting the win. So stylistically, those are the best types of opponents for him. But the thing is with Matt Frevola, Frevola's also been inconsistent with performances, and you have to take that into consideration. But when you're looking at a put-together fighter, like Frevola's a good striker, he's a good wrestler, he's a good grappler. So in actual fact, what I've just said there, you might think, okay, well, he's well-rounded. He's one of these types of fights that Nelson should be, doing well against. But the thing is, Frevola is got edges in this fight from the wrestling perspective and the grappling perspective, in my opinion. Like, for me, I think Frevola's got just as much chance of knocking Nelson out as Nelson has of Frevola. Like, both fighters have been hurt and knocked out before, and I feel like both could be on the good end and the bad end of that in this fight. But again, just like I've said with Cody Gibson, but this is a little bit more elevated. Matt Frevola, I think, is just a better athlete. I think he's faster. I think he's powerful. I think the wrestling and the grappling is going to play a huge factor in this fight because I think he will look to take Nelson down. And once he gets him down, I think we're going to see a real difference on the mat. Like, Nelson can stay safe. He can also get back up to his feet off the mat as well, off his back. But I just feel that Frevola is going to do good work on top. I think if Nelson's starting to turn in to stand up to his feet, I think he'll be met with some brutal ground and pound. Frevola hits hard. He's got hammers for his ground and pound. So I'm just looking at this fight as, yes, on paper, I kind of feel like you would think the fight's going to be close. But I think Matt Frevola has got an edge here over Nelson just for the fact that he's just a better fighter. The striking is close, admittedly, but when you've got someone that's a slightly better mover, slightly quicker, that striking edge slowly starts to lean to that side as well. But then when you're looking at the wrestling and grappling here, I think Frevola can be a real nightmare for Nelson from that wrestling and grappling perspective. If Frevola's game plan is to get the fight down to the mat, then I think he's going to do really well in this fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Matt Frevola to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is probably the most intriguing fight on the card, in my opinion. Maybe my most favourite fight that I'm anticipated on the card as well. We've got Charles Jourdain versus Davey Grant. Now, look, from a betting perspective, I've got a good history of betting both of these fighters, more recently Davey Grant. And when I saw this fight announced, I thought, well, holy shit, how do you pick between both of these guys? Like, they match up very well, very similar in height, in power, in strength, reach, the physicality, the physical traits and stats between them are quite similar. And then also, they're both seasoned vets at this point. They've both got really good wins. They're both lost fights as well, but they're very, very similar in all aspects of mixed martial arts. So I'm thinking, well, I wonder where the betting line's going to be for this, because Davey Grant is consistently disrespected on the betting market. Always seems like he's the underdog, and that's where we've cashed him quite a few times as an underdog, where he shouldn't be an underdog. Honestly, it's criminal. The betting market is criminal sometimes when it comes to how they line fights, and for certain fighters, Davey Grant's just always overlooked. So when the betting lines first came out, it was like a dead even pick 'em on every bookie, like minus 110 each, minus 115 each, like absolutely dead even, nothing between the two. And I'm thinking, well, okay, they've got it right. But then I'm looking this morning, and man, the money's coming on Charles Jourdain, who's now sitting at like minus 160, minus 170. Suddenly, Davey Grant is this underdog that shouldn't be an underdog again. It's the same old story. And, Davey Grant performs. Man, he's turning into one of these fighters where, look, admittedly, Blackshear could have had him from that wrestling and grappling perspective, and probably, should have done. And it just shows you that if a fighter is very fluid towards the game plan of wrestling and grappling, and the tricky at a good level, that they're probably going to be able to get at Davey Grant. But on the feet striking, Grant's just difficult to beat. Even go back to that Daniel Marcos fight. Marcos was, absolutely flying. I still think Marcos is a high level striker, and he just found it hard to just get at Davey Grant. Davey Grant's just one of the, I don't know whether it's his aura or his stature inside the cage, along with the skill set, of course, but he's just so difficult to get at striking. And then when you've got Charles Jourdain on the other side, yeah, Jourdain's got a tricky grappling game, admittedly, but he's predominantly a striker. It does make me wonder, though. There is a part of me that wonders, is Jourdain just going to flip the script here and go to the takedowns? Because if he can get Davey Grant down, I do think Jourdain's got that quality of jiu-jitsu that might cause Grant some issues. But Grant's, I'm making out here that Grant's not that good of a grappler, but he is. Grant's just a tough fighter to beat. He's a very, very tough fighter to beat. The strike, getting the better of him, striking's hard. Wrestling, the grappling is decent as well. Look, it's a tough fight. I think it's one of these 50-50 fights, because on the flip side, Jourdain's a tough fighter to beat striking as well. You've seen so many strikers that Jourdain's fought that's turned into wrestlers to beat him, and that's a credit to Jourdain as well. He's a fighter that's well put together. I think from a speed perspective, he might have the speed advantage here, which does make things interesting from a striking perspective. But Davey Grant's got that stoic forward pressure that just lands volume, that's tricky, that I think is probably a little bit more technical, and from a fight IQ perspective, reads the game a little bit better than Jourdain. So they've both got their edges from a striking perspective. The real finer aspects of the striking perspective is what I'm talking about. And then when it comes to the wrestling and grappling, is it going to play that much of a factor? I'll probably have to lean towards no. So it just leaves a coin toss fight on the feet. And I don't know. It's tough. Both fighters could absolutely win this fight. And again, just like I've mentioned earlier on with Cody Gibson and Aoriqileng, I could see a 30-27 from both fighters winning all 3 rounds. I could also see a 29-28 split decision where nobody's got a clue which way the fight's going to be scored. If there's a finish, I don't think there's going to be a finish. Both fighters seem to be tough, but that kind of puts them both in the same likelihood of finding a finish as well. So, look, I think coin toss is the right phrase to use. I think it's a coin toss fight, but this is a betting podcast. So for that reason, I'm just going to side with the underdog, because, there is clearly... Look, if Jourdain was the underdog, I'd be saying the same thing about him, that he's the value side. But it's Grant that's the underdog. Grant's the value side. In a 50-50 fight on a betting podcast, I'm going to side with whichever side is offering that plus money. So I'm picking Davey Grant to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Bruno Bulldog Silva versus Hyun Sung Park. Now, Bruno Silva's a fighter that you've got to love watching. Like, he's absolutely kill or be killed. And recently it's be killed. But he has got a good win, after you watch his last two fights, he does have a win against Cody Djorden. But the issue that I've got with Silva is I kind of feel like his age is maybe starting to show in his fights. Like, he's super skilled, he's super technical, he's got power in his hands for the division, but he's also got like a really dangerous grappling game, and he's added wrestling to that over the years as well. So he's become a really well put together fighter. But it just seems to be like he's maybe been in a few wars, his body's looking a little bit worn, and I just feel like the age is showing a little bit with him. And even in that fight, the last fight that he won against Cody Djorden, he was very much not winning that fight until he did. So again, it's like, from Silva's perspective, what is he going to be like against a young and hungry, fresher upcoming fighter in Hyun Sung Park? Like, admittedly, look, Park took a step up in competition against Tatsu Taira that he just wasn't ready for, and he did better. He still did better than what I thought he was going to. Tatsu Taira is a fighter that was fighting at the top of, fighting fighters much better than Park. He was fighting up in competition, and then suddenly a short notice fight, manufactures due to other pullouts, and Park fights Taira, and you just knew it was going to be a bad fight for Park. Like, stylistically, Park needs to be the better grappler in fights, or at least the better wrestler so he can be the better grappler. But Taira's just like a live wire. Whereas Bruno Silva, I think, might be the better straight grappler in a jiu-jitsu contest, but he's not the live wire that Taira is. He's not going to be like 100 miles an hour on the mat. I could definitely see Park getting a takedown on Silva, laying heavy on top, and Silva just, again, working to get into good positions and to get out of bad positions. But I just don't know how successful he's going to be. I think Park's going to be quite tricky. And if anybody was ever going to submit Bruno Silva at this stage in his career, it is probably, somebody like Hyun Sung Park that's going to capitalise off something. I'm not saying he is going to get the submission. I kind of do see it hard to believe with Bruno Silva, just because he's that good from a technical perspective with his jiu-jitsu. But all I'm saying is, I wouldn't be overly shocked if Hyun Sung Park ended up on his back and won by rear naked choke. That seems to be his go-to. But even on the feet striking, Park's got to mind his P's and Q's for sure. But I just think the striking is going to be a good aid into the wrestling. I think even if it's Silva that's getting taken down, but right back up to his feet, getting taken down and right back up to his feet, and then suddenly is hesitant to strike because of the takedown coming in, and that allows Park to open up a little bit from a striking perspective. I just think that Park is, at this moment, the slightly better fighter, in a better position, in his prime, faster, more athletic, fresher in his career as well. I just think it's a good fight for Park. It's got to be one that, as I've already mentioned, Park's got to mind his P's and Q's. You cannot take Bruno Silva lightly because you'll get beat. But he's going to know that. As long as he minds his P's and Q's and he doesn't make any crazy moves or crazy mistakes, I think it's a good fight for Park to look good in as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Hyun Sung Park to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Danny Barlow versus Jourdain Santos. Now, Danny Barlow, the left hand from God, came into the UFC with hype. He was sparking people out. He was looking great, looking sharp. Then he takes the loss to Sam Patterson. And look, this happens to every single hyped prospect that comes into the UFC. Unless you're called Khabib Nurmagomedov, it happens to every single one of them. And what that is you come in with a load of hype, which once again, for those that didn't hear it in the back at the start of the podcast, it's not the fighter's fault with the hype that they've got on them and the expectations that everybody else is putting on them. And then you end up losing a fight where everyone expects you to win. But then you go on this crazy win streak afterwards because that loss is probably the best thing that happens to you in your career. Sometimes, it's shit losing. No fighter wants to lose, but sometimes you have to lose to improve and to get to where you want to be. And, it's called taking one step back to take two steps forward. And I feel like a lot of these hype fighters go through this. Danny Barlow. I mean, look, the Sam Patterson one at the time, everyone was like, oh, okay, like nobody expected Sam Patterson to win that. But look what Sam Patterson's doing right now. He's a fighter that had a slow start to the UFC, but now his qualities are shining through and he's looking unbelievable. So for as bad as losses are, it's a loss that's probably aged relatively well for Danny Barlow. So straight away with Barlow, I think we're going to see a very different Barlow coming back into this fight. A Barlow that we saw previously, that's sharp, that's on point, that's powerful, that's dangerous. And then you've got Jourdain Santos. Now, Jourdain Santos, I wasn't sure what to really expect with him when he came into the UFC for Ozzy Diaz on his UFC debut, and I thought, well, okay, maybe the UFC are looking at this Ozzy Diaz fight and thinking, right, well, maybe we're unsure of where Santos is. Let this fight tell us where he's at. Ozzy Diaz, for me, is a fighter that, you know, doesn't have the highest ceiling in the UFC, and is a fighter that, you know, a lot of the fighters that are coming into the UFC probably should have a decent time against. Now, Ozzy Diaz isn't easy to beat. He's got power, he's well-rounded, he's got good cardio, he's tough, he's durable. Like, he's got some good qualities about him. But again, you know, we come back to the Kyle Nelson thing. When you're tough and durable, and toughness is the best aspect of your game, it's kind of not the greatest thing to be known for. So I did expect Jourdain Santos to beat Ozzy Diaz, but he didn't win the fight. He lost the decision. He was out-volumed. He absorbed 135 strikes against Ozzy Diaz. So if you're absorbing 135 strikes against Ozzy Diaz, what do you think you're going to absorb against Danny Barlow, who in my opinion is levels above Ozzy Diaz from a striking perspective, and Barlow's got the power upside as well. I'm telling you now, you don't absorb 135 strikes from Danny Barlow without getting knocked out, and this is my issue for Jourdain Santos. I think Santos is very... Because look, there's two sides to every story, and with that fight where he absorbed 135 strikes against Diaz, he also landed 130 himself. So he's clearly a fighter that's got that 100 plus significant strikes in his locker, which is again good numbers for any fighter striking in the UFC. But the issue is the 135 strikes absorbed. And I think Santos is going to try and pour volume on Danny Barlow here, because that's the only way that you're really going to try and put that fire out, so to speak. But Danny Barlow's just going to be happy to engage her. I think he's going to have a speed advantage, a movement advantage. I think he's more athletic, he's more powerful, he's more accurate. And I think Santos is going to walk onto something here and get knocked out. So for those reasons, I'm picking Danny Barlow to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Kyle Prepolec versus Drew Dober. Now, the one thing I'm going to say about Kyle Prepolec is, look, since he was cut from the UFC, you know, he really did the UFC a massive favour by stepping up on short notice and fighting Benoit Saint-Denis in a fight that really, really wasn't great for him. And, you know, a lot of people will be like, oh, why is Prepolec stepping up to fight Benoit Saint-Denis? This is, you know, a foregone conclusion, and, you know, he's never going to win. Well, he signed a new deal with the UFC because of it. So you kind of, you know, you sort of have to, you know, not spend so much time, you know, licking the wounds. You know, you've just signed a UFC contract, you're doing the UFC a favour, and you get 3 more fights after it. Now, what's unfortunate for Prepolec is from the Benoit Saint-Denis fight, which he lost, he's now fighting Drew Dober in the second fight of that 4-fight deal. A little bit unfair in my opinion, but look, there's a level difference here, and this is not shitting on Prepolec. Prepolec's got his, you know, abilities and his skill set, and there's a certain level of fighter I still believe he can win in the UFC. Like, he's got a good record and he's a savvy veteran. But Drew Dober's also that savvy veteran that's a level above him pretty much everywhere, in my opinion, and that's what's going to make it difficult for Prepolec to win this fight. Like, Dober is striking is better, his wrestling is better, his grappling is better, he's beaten better, he's dominated and beaten and finished better level of opponents than what Prepolec is himself, and the opponents that Prepolec has also fought himself. So I just kind of feel like it's a massive uphill battle for Prepolec to win this fight. The one thing that I will say is Dober's been in loads of wars, and he's always had that, you know, that big durable chin where, you know, he'll take shots and come forwards and super entertaining to watch because of it. But you are just starting to see a few cracks in that glass, and at some point the glass is going to shatter, and Dober's durability for me is on thin ice. I think that Dober at some point is going to start getting cracked more often, and the knockout start. I mean, we've seen him knocked out already, but you can, unless you're getting knocked out like 2 or 3 times in a row, that's when you can start putting some red flags on durability. But all I'm saying is the cracks are just starting to show a little bit. So maybe that's the only sort of, like, you know, positive aspect I can have over onto Prepolec's side that, look, if he can just catch something, if he can catch Dober with something hard, maybe he can add an extra crack to that glass as well and knock him out. But again, I just think it's a low percentage probability against a fighter that, in my opinion, is better everywhere, both offensively and defensively. So for those reasons, I'm picking Drew Dober to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Stephanie Luciano versus Ravena Oliveira. And again, I just feel like this is going to be a tough fight for Oliveira. You know, talking of tough fights, like we've just mentioned in the last breakdown. But, like, Stephanie Luciano is going to be a level above striking here. I think, you know, a striking is sharp, it's tight, it's tall, it's long, it's rangy. You know, she's a very comfortable striker. And against Ravena Oliveira kind of crashes a little bit into the striking. The striking looks a little bit super green as well. And then, like I say, it's just not as effective as Luciano. So obviously all fights start standing, and from the moment this fight goes, I think Luciano is just going to piece Oliveira up. I think Oliveira is going to have to try and get Luciano down. But again, there's going to be two issues with this. Well, three issues. First of all, I don't think Oliveira's takedown game is going to be super strong enough to be able to take Luciano down, who seems to have decent takedown defense. But then Luciano is also like I've said, the much better striker. She likes to fight in close quarters, or all ranges actually. Close quarters, you know, short range, mid range, long range. She's going to be fluent in all ranges here. So when Oliveira is looking to try and take her down, she's got to have to get through that long range, that mid range into the short range to shoot. But she's going to be getting pieced at long range. I think she's going to get hit at mid range as well. And once Oliveira, if she does get into that short range and shoots a takedown, she's going to be met with knees and elbows, and a fighter that's got a good Thai style with good balance. I just feel like it's a horrible fight for Oliveira. I think Luciano has got an opponent here where she's going to be able to flourish, have a good time, enjoy herself, go through the gears and look really, really good. So for those reasons, I'm picking Stephanie Luciano to win this fight. And next up, we've got Azamat Bekoev versus Yousri Belgawi. Now, Belgawi's coming off the Contender Series. I wasn't overly convinced with the performance, if I'm being honest. Like, it was a very back and forth performance where he might have won, but if he did win, and it was by decision, I don't think he would have got a contract. But then he found his power in the third round and got a good knockout and made himself, as the commentary said on the Contender Series, fight undeniable for a contract. But the thing is with Bekoev, look, this is a fighter that I've picked, you know, he's 2-0 in the UFC. I think I've picked and bet against him both times. And that's not because of any sort of lack of quality. Like, you can see this guy's like a fire hydrant. Like, he's big, he's powerful, he's got knockout power, he's got wrestling, he's got grappling. Like, he's very, very solid. The issue that I've always had with Bekoev, and we're still yet to see it, by the way, is the cardio. So, you know, pre-UFC fights, when you're looking at him on the regional scene and he's going deeper into fights, the cardio just drains. Like, he's a fighter that is, like I say, big, powerful, comes out at 100 mile an hour, likes to overwhelm his opponents. But when his opponents weather a storm and he's expended a lot of energy, the gas tank seems to be quite drained. And it's going to be interesting to see if we do get past like a round or two here against, you know, Belgawi. And if we do, then, you know, we might start to see those issues with the cardio side of stuff. But I've got to a point where I just can't pick against Bekoev now, even though I've got a funny feeling that the cardio issues are still going to be there. He's just that much of a brute force, like, powerhouse early in fights that these opponents at this level, I just don't think are going to see out like that pressure and power early in fights. Where Bekoev, I think, is going to start running into trouble is when he starts to step into the top 15. And I don't think it's going to be a million miles away, that process, because I think if he beats Belgawi here, which I am picking him to win the fight, spoiler alert, I think he maybe has one more fight very close to the top 15, or maybe he does fight somebody that is top 10 to 15, beats them, and then that's when he's now in the thick of it against fighters that will be able to withstand his pressure, his storm that he brings early in fights, and be able to wear his gas tank down. But I just don't think Belgawi's it. Like, Belgawi's a good striker. Again, he's big and powerful for the division as well, but his volume's quite low. He weights a little bit too much. Even though he's got this Dutch style kickboxing game that is very, very technical and very, very good, the volume's just low. And I just think that with Belgawi's volume's low and he's not putting it on Bekoev, he's not bringing the fight to Bekoev and trying to drain the gas tank of Bekoev, it's going to allow Bekoev to come forwards. And when Bekoev's coming forwards, he's landing good hard shots himself. He's cracking you and then shooting you into a takedown, and then he's got brutal ground and pound. And I think Belgawi here could potentially get run through. I think it's not a good fight for Belgawi at all. I think it's another fight where Bekoev's going to look very, very good. So for those reasons, and for the first time, I'm picking Azamat Bekoev to win this fight. And in the next fight, the final fight to break down, we've got Melissa Croden making her UFC debut versus Tainara Lisboa. Now, when I saw Melissa Croden added to this fight, UFC debut, and she's also from Canada as well. She's fighting Tainara Lisboa. Lisboa's coming off a loss where she didn't look that good at all. My first thoughts is the UFC have signed a local fighter to the country they're in, obviously in Canada, and they've put her against Lisboa, and Lisboa that didn't look great last time out has now got an opportunity to look really good, and she'll probably be, head and shoulders above her opponent in regards to her skill set. But actually, when I'm looking into Croden's a sneaky good fighter. The only question mark I've got on her is the level of competition isn't the highest, but man, she looks like a well put together fighter. She's got good striking, she's tall, she's long, she's rangy. When she's in the clinch, she's very controlled in the clinch as well. She's got good elbows, good knees. She's got good positioning when she gets on top of her opponents as well. And I'm thinking, actually, Croden's been signed here because it was the perfect opportunity to bring her in on a UFC debut in front of a home crowd, get a name put on the map. And if she ends up looking really good, which I think she could potentially look really good, then she's going to move on to better things with people knowing who she is now. And also Tainara Lisboa, for as not great as she looked last time out, it's not a bad name to have on your record from a winning perspective either. So I actually come out of tape here a little bit like, okay, well, I went into tape thinking this is a perfect fight for Lisboa, and I can kind of see what the UFC are doing. But then you start watching tape on Croden and you think, well, actually, this is a really even fight. And then the odds drop and you've got Croden at like plus 105, Lisboa minus 120. And it makes sense. It really does make sense. I did wonder if Croden was actually going to be the underdog, though, because if that was the other way around, if it was Croden minus 120 with Lisboa plus 105, plus 110, I could have understood that as well. I think it's a really close fight. Wouldn't surprise me if this line flipped as well, because I do think that Lisboa's got her issues. Like the main issue that she's got is she's super good from an offensive perspective. And I said this as well prior to that last fight against Luana Santos. Luana Santos was the underdog, and I bet Luana Santos as well. I really, really liked her in that fight. I remember she was like my favourite bet on the entire card when she fought Lisboa, because Lisboa had come off a fight and a win against Ravena Oliveira, who, again, as I've kind of alluded to earlier on, I don't hold Ravena Oliveira that high in regards to the UFC, if I'm being honest. I don't think the ceiling's that high. But Lisboa went to a back and forth fight against Oliveira where she was clearly the better fighter, but just from a defensive perspective, shocking. And this is the issue with Lisboa. She's very good from an offensive perspective, good striker, good wrestler, good grappler. But as soon as it comes to striking defense, defending takedowns, getting back up off her feet, she looks like a completely different fighter. Like, some fighters are obviously better offensively, and then defensively they struggle a little bit, but still end up managing to get through. But I've never seen such like a black and white type of fighter in, a night and day type of fighter where, you're so good offensively, but then so bad defensively. And that is going to lead to more losses than wins in the UFC, in my opinion. Like, Lisboa is going to put it on Croden, and I think she's going to be real competitive. But when it's Croden's turn to go, when it's Croden's turn to have moments in the fight, I think Lisboa is going to fall apart. And I just, until I start seeing that defensive aspect of a game working through, and the same thing happened with the Luana Santos fight. Lisboa was looking good, but the second that she had to defend, she got absolutely ran through and then finished. So for me, it's just a trust issue with Lisboa. I know that she's good offensively, but again, when you're that in contrast defensively, it's going to lead to more losses than wins. And I actually think Croden's a well put together fighter that kind of will exploit that and take advantage of it. So for me, for those reasons, I'm picking the UFC newcomer Melissa Croden to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. Thank you, as always, for everybody tuning in. If you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, please come over to YouTube as well. On YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and you get an email notification when we drop a breakdown podcast every single week. Also really, really helpful for the channel as well. Again, these are free predictions. We, of course, don't charge for predictions or for the podcasts. So anything that you can do to help us that's free from your end, we really appreciate it. That also includes liking the video. Drop a comment as well. Tell me who your favorite underdog is. Tell me what your favorite parlay is or your favorite parlay piece. Tell me which of the bigger favorites is going to be the one that is going to upset the apple cart this week. You know, absolutely anything. It is myself that gets back to and replies to every comment. I am very busy week in, week out with other aspects that I work within the sport, but I always try my best to get back to every comment, and I really, really do appreciate everybody taking the time to listen into the podcast and to also interact with us as well. And you can interact the best on YouTube, so come over to our YouTube channel as well. And one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. We've got AI with Base AI, our UFC prediction software, which gives you a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight, of every UFC event. We've got professional handicapper betting advice from myself as well. We don't separate those two services, so it's all included in every betting package. And our services and the subscriptions are super affordable, and the reason we make them affordable is because we believe that you should be making profit on every single betting ticket that you're putting on. And to get into a position where you're starting to profit on top of your bets, you've got to pay off obviously the money that you've spent with us from our subscriptions. So the more affordable that we can make the subscriptions means the quicker that you can make that money back and start profiting on top of your bets as well. And that's all at MMA Play 365. It's $5 for one event, or you've got the option of a $10 per month, which is, you know, you'd spend more on a coffee in a month. Or we've got the $99 for an entire 12 months, 1 year of betting content from the UFC events. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.